Good morning, everybody. Today I'm going to use this short tutorial to show you how to make a canvas drawing using p5.js on a web page that includes an animation. And in this case, the animation I'm going to use is a little round ball that will bounce around the screen from corner to corner. You can see here I've got a file open already in my Atom text editor. I've got a little web project that I created, which is mostly empty at this point. It consists of two files. This is the index file, and then I've got my script file over here. It's empty for the time being. My index file is minimalistic. There's not much here. You can see there's two script tags in the head of the page. The first script tag brings in the p5.js library, and you've seen that in a previous tutorial. So you know what that means. The second script tag is the link to my own JavaScript, where I'm going to write all of my own animation code and drawing code. And I've said before, and I'll say it again, this script tag could actually be repositioned and put down here at the end of the body if you wanted to as well. For now, it's fine to leave it here where it is. It'll work just fine. I have a header, and then I have an empty div that has an ID. And so there's nothing in it, but that's obviously going to hold the canvas when I put it there in a few moments. Okay, so I'm going to go over to my drawing script.js file over here. We'll start writing some code to make this happen. You can see also that I've got open in another window Chrome with the project, the index file loaded, and that's all you see for now. Okay, so let's start off by defining a couple of functions. This is p5.js, so you do need to define two functions, one of which is called setup. And the other one, of course, you know by now, is called draw. And carrying over from the processing environment that you worked in the past, which used Java, this is in your first course or previous class that you took, you recall that these functions were used with a different keyword. We used void in front of them. And that's because in Java and in other programming languages as well, functions such as setup and draw have return types, meaning that when the function is done, it can wrap up and return a value to you of some type. In JavaScript, we don't have that simply because there aren't types at all in JavaScript. You never see yourself doing anything like this, int x or float y or some such thing. Those data types don't exist in JavaScript. You cannot use them. JavaScript, being a scripting language, just sort of infers the type of the variable based upon what you put in it, what you store in it later on. So you don't have words like this. Void was used, if you remember, to describe a function that returned nothing. So here you just literally always use keyword function. So that is one difference between JavaScript and the Java processing environment that you may recall from a previous course. So function setup and function draw as such. And then up at the top of the code, I'm actually going to take a moment and just declare a global variable var ball, like that. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do inside setup is actually manufacture my canvas. Var canv equals create canvas. And I have a choice over how big I want to make it, so I'm just going to kind of fall back on a standard 800 by 600 size, like so. And again, this is a P5 thing, this create canvas function. It's not native to JavaScript and the web. The next thing I'm going to do is put a border around my canvas. You've seen this in a previous video. Canvas.elt is what allows me to access the actual canvas element itself from the P5 object. And then I'll call style and set the border property. And this is just so you can see the thing on the screen. And we'll set it to 2px solid green. You've seen this in the previous video, so I'll go through it quickly. And if I do that, and one more thing, I'm actually going to take and use a handy function that I can call on my canv object, and that's to set the parent that I want to put it inside. And all I have to do in here is pass in the ID of the div that I want to be the container for the canvas. Assuming that I spelled it correctly. There we go. All right, so if we come back here, you could see, so I now have a canvas. It's inside of a div, which is nice because I can move that around. It's got a green border. It's 800 by 600 pixels. The next thing I'm going to do is define the ball. Now, in a previous course, you would have made a class to do this. You would say class ball, something such as this. Right? This is what you would have done elsewhere. And actually, it wouldn't even be inside your setup function. It would be down here somewhere else. You say class ball, and then curly braces, and inside here you'd list the properties of the ball, and it would say something like int x, comma y, comma velocity x, comma velocity y, and then you'd have something called the class constructor, which would say ball, so on and so forth. That is not proper syntax for JavaScript. There is a way to make official classes in JavaScript, but we're not going to do that here today, and they don't look quite like this. So instead, because this doesn't work, we're going to use a different technique known as JavaScript object notation, and this has been in use for many, many years. This is a very simple way to sort of fake a class. It's a quick and dirty way to define an object, and it's actually really nice. It's actually really useful. I like the syntax. I think it's simple. I think it's clean. It's going to make a lot of sense to you, and it goes something like this. So let's start off by defining the ball. So I've got the ball variable already declared up at the top of my page, of my file, sorry, var ball. So here we go. Ball equals, and now I use curly braces like so. And inside of these curly braces, I put any properties of the ball that I wish to set right now. And then I can set their values as well at the same time. I do it like this. So the ball needs to have an x position. So I say x. I use a colon like that. And then whatever I want it to be. So in this case, I'm setting the x position to 20. And you can put a space there if you want, if you like that better, or you can leave it. And then I use a comma. Not a semicolon, but a comma, and I keep going. So I say y, colon 50. And a lot of people prefer to put these on separate lines, like that. All right, and that's fine for now. I'm going to add to this in a few minutes, but let's keep it simple for the time being. All right, so there's my ball. It's at position x20, y50. And then I'm going to come down into my draw function, and I'm actually going to draw the thing. And the first thing I always do inside draw is set a background. Again, this is a processing thing. It's not a native HTML5 canvas command, but it is P5, so we can use it. You have to set the background because when things start moving, if you don't redraw the background at the beginning of draw each time, then things won't move the right way. You'll get smears instead of moving objects. So we effectively are clearing the whole canvas every 60th of a second by putting this command here at the beginning. Okay. Then I'm going to choose to draw an ellipse at the location of the ball. So I'm going to use this information here to actually draw the positioning to draw the ellipse. And so it goes something like this. To access these variables, these properties of this ball, I say ball.x, ball.y, and then I'm going to hard code the radius for now, and we'll just say, I don't know, something like 20, comma 20. And certainly, if you wanted to be fancy, inside here you could put something like a radius of 20, right? And if I do that, I have to put another comma there. And then I could change this to ball.r. if I wanted to. Okay, so all things like that can be done. Right? And in fact, I'll just leave that for the time being. Okay, let's see what that does. So coming back here and refreshing the page, there's the ball. Okay, now if I wanted to fill it in, make it look a little bit better, I could do that. I could set the fill prior to drawing the ellipse. I could say fill. Let's make it red, maybe 255.00, if I recall. And there's a red ball with a black line around it. Again, stressing that all of the familiar commands that you recall from a previous processing course are now applicable on this canvas because of the use of P5 right here. Right, so this makes it really nice, makes it easy for us to now draw and to animate. And what you may not realize is that the draw function is already being called for you, 60 frames per second. So it's quick and easy to actually animate this ball. All right? Let's add that animation. So here's how we're going to do that. Inside the ball class, or the ball object, I'm going to create some methods. Now in JavaScript, methods are actually objects themselves. They're things themselves. You can store them in variables. So it's not going to look that different from this list of properties that I have here. For me to add a method, all I need to do is put another comma here, go down to a new line, and I'm going to name the method move, put a colon, and then after that write the keyword function as such, open and close my curly braces like that. And then inside here, write what the move function really is. Okay, and I'll start simple and we'll make it more complex as we go on. So for the move function, I'm going to write this dot x plus equals 1. Now I need to say a couple of things about this. First off, if you want to access variables here, x, y, r, and such, inside the object, you have to preface with keyword this. You can't just say x plus equals 1. It won't know what you mean. So this dot x means this is referring to this ball. So you want the x property of this thing. Okay, so this dot x plus equals 1. And I think some of you will remember this is actually shorthand for this dot x equals this dot x plus 1. That's another way to say it. Basically, just take whatever the value of x is, in this case 20, and increment it to 1 by 1. So it's now 21, and then 22, and then 23, and 24. If we keep repeatedly calling this function, x will increment by 1 each time. All right, now there's a lot of ways that we can say that, but this is one way. All right. And then the last thing I'm going to say is if you look at how simple this is, I've got a list of properties inside my ball object. I've got an x position, a y position, a radius, and then I've got an actual function stored inside there, and the function itself goes by the word move. Move is a function that does this. Okay, cool. So let's try that. If I go over to, I'll save it, make sure I save it, I come over to the page, and I'll show you, it doesn't work initially, and this is a mistake you'll make time and time again, so I'm making it on purpose. I'll refresh the page, it doesn't move, and I say, well, why? Why does it not move? I open up my console, I look, I don't have any errors, I don't have any warnings, I'm wondering what's going on. You've probably figured out by now the reason for that is I'm not using that function. I'm not calling that function. Even though I've defined it, I'm not actually using it. So what I want to do is down here inside the draw function, type ball.move. And that will be called every 60th of a second. And it will increment the value of x. It starts at 20, and then it'll increment it. And it will then, when it comes back around through the draw function, it will redraw the ellipse each time at the new position of ball.x. Okay, so saving that and running it, you can see it's moving. All right. All right. So that's step 1. That's the hardest part. So from here going forward, it's just making this a little fancier, but by and large, that's most of it. So what I want to do now is I want to actually create a y velocity in addition to an x velocity. I don't want the ball to just move to the right. I want it to move maybe to the right and down or up. Also, thinking ahead, it's off screen. It's disappeared. I want it to bounce when it reaches the right end of the screen and back and forth. So those are the two things I have to implement. Let's start off with the y. The first thing actually I'm going to do, though, is create 2 more variables. And I'm going to call this velocity x. And I'm just going to set that equal to, let's make it 2. And then I'm going to create velocity y. And let's make that 2 as well. Okay, and then I'm going to come over here and change this move function. So instead of plus equal 1, it's plus equal vx. All right. And that way I have the ability to change this Because eventually what I want to do is make it negative when it hits the far right wall, so it comes around in the other direction. So instead of hard coding this to some number like 2 or 1, I'm going to let it be this value right here. All right, and hopefully, let's see what happens if I do this. It's not going to work, but you'll get a syntax error on line 13. All right. And there's a couple things wrong with this, right, for starters. So the first thing is, that if whether or not you've picked up on it, I don't know, but the first problem is right here, right here. So syntax error means I've got something just wrong in terms of syntax, in terms of symbols, and it's the semicolon, right? So you don't use semicolons inside the JavaScript notation as you separate your properties from each other. So that should be a comma. And similarly, that should be a comma. So many of us are used to typing semicolons at the end of every line. So I'm trying to show you the common errors that you'll make. That's one of them. Okay, so everything inside here is separated by commas. Great. Now we go back. It's still not going to work. I get uncaught reference error VX is not defined on line 15. Coming back over to here, that's this line. It says VX is not defined. I remember, oh yeah, that's right, this dot VX. So there's another mistake that you'll make time and time again. You have to use this keywords over and over again. Okay. We're good? There's the ball. Okay, let's add in Y velocity as well. So in our move function, the way that we can do that is we can just add another line. So we'll go like this, we'll go like that, and then we'll come down here and we'll say this dot y plus equals this dot vy. And you can put semicolons in here if you want to, inside the lines of inside the function. You don't have to, because semicolons are always optional in JavaScript. I like to put them, so I am going to put them in there. But notice that this is distinct from using them in between the list of properties inside the object. Okay, so coming back to my browser, you'll see it. The ball now moves in the following manner, but it still goes off the screen. All right, the last step is to make it bounce at any corner. And the way I'm going to do that is just to define another function. It's going to be called bounce. It's defined this way. There's my curly braces. Let's write the code inside here, and then we'll have to call that function down here after we call move. So bounce is going to look something like this. It's a simple conditional. Now, I'd like to say if x is greater than something like with some such thing, something like that, right? Or less than 0, something of that nature. Here's how I have to do it. Right, so the syntax is like this. If this dot x is greater than, and I think my width I set to 800, but to make it a little more dynamic in case I change that later, I can actually just say canv dot width. Okay, that's a nice way to do it. So if this dot x is greater than canvas dot width, here's or, the pipe symbol, you've seen that before, or this dot x is less than 0. So if either of those things is true, then this dot x, or this dot vx, equals negative this dot vx. Okay. Once again, I can put a semicolon there if I want to. I'm going to take the same and write the same structure for y. So if this dot y is greater than canv dot height, or this dot y is less than 0, this dot vy equals negative this dot vy, like that. Right. And then I have to call that function. I have to use it, or it won't actually be implemented. So down here I'm going to say ball.bounce, like that. There we go. All right, and if I haven't made any mistakes with syntax, there's my entire file all at once there. Okay, so if I haven't made any mistakes, you should see a ball that bounces around the screen. Just get the whole file on screen for you at once. All right, here we go. Uncaught syntax error. Let's see. Drawing script 18. What have I done? Ah, yeah. Okay, so this is, I didn't plan to make this mistake. This is perfect. So I have a syntax error on line 18. If I come over to here and I look at line 18, I don't see anything immediately wrong with it. But if I look above it, I'm missing something right there. So because this function is another function inside this ball object, these things are separated, and everything inside this JavaScript object notation needs to be separated by a comma. And I forgot one, so comma goes there. Okay? Finally, let's run it again. There it is. Let's see what happens. Good. Good. Okay, I think we got it. Great. All right, so now to wrap up, I'll say a couple of final things. That's one ball bouncing around the canvas. Certainly, we could define a second variable, ball2, right? And we could create that as well and bounce that as well. The code's going to start getting a little long and a little redundant if we do that. 3 balls, 4, 5, 6 is going to start getting really messy. So sure, there are ways of abstracting this using arrays or lists so that you can kind of package a whole bunch of balls at once into a structure, and you don't have to keep repeating this over and over again. And we're going to move to that eventually. And you know, doing that as well, we could even do things like this. We could have things like color, and then we could define different colors for each ball on the screen. So that's something to think about if you're wondering, well, is there a better way to do this? The answer is yes, there's always a better way to do something, but for the time being, let's start with this. So that's that. Then finally, in the meantime, I just want to end again by stressing the simplicity and I think the beauty of this notation right here of creating an actual object in your code, a ball object, that consists of a list of properties followed by a list of methods that it knows how to enact. And they don't have to be in that order necessarily. You can intersperse, you could put some properties down here, make another property like color. And don't forget, you'd have to have the comma here. All right. But it's really quick, it's really easy, it's a really nice way to define objects. And you can do this obviously not just with a ball, but with a paddle if you're making something like a Pong game. So this is primarily the most common way that we create these things in JavaScript. And I hope this was helpful. I'll make another one of these shortly that shows how to take this to the next level using an array to house and hold on to many different balls that are drawn around on the canvas. Thanks for watching. As always, take care. Bye-bye.